In today's video, we are going to be having a look at how you can learn how to animate like Lemmino or Lemmino. Anyways, today's video is sponsored by Artlist, and we're going to be taking a look at the brand new feature, the AI voiceover, which I'm super excited about. Also, this project file that we're going to be working on today will be available on my Patreon if you're interested. Link to that down in the description as well. Now, before we get into the animations itself, let's break down what the Lemmino style actually is. If we take a look at some of the videos, you can see there's a mix of 2D and 3D animations, but we will be focusing mainly on the 2D part of it. It's all a super simple color palette, monochromatic, mainly just black and white, with a little bit of splash of color, sometimes a little bit of red or greens, just to highlight certain words or areas in the animations. There is a very pronounced use of Sapphire plugin, Chromawarp, which you can see in the chromatic aberration of the edges. Looks super cool, but very, very pronounced, and makes it a very stylistic. As far as texture goes, it's pretty simple. There's a little bit of turbulent displays and a little bit of glow and grain just to really spice it up, but overall it's a super simple aesthetic. One thing I really admire about the work is the high quality assets that they use. It's always super sharp and crispy and fits the style very well. And last but not least, they have exceptional sound design to really create this feeling of a universe and really bring the viewer into the story. And they also have super clean voiceover, which we'll be working with a little bit today thanks to this video sponsor, Artlist. But how do we take this and actually make it into something? Well, first we got to start with our script and our story. In this case, I just had ChatGPT help me write a little bit of a script. You can of course write this yourself, but writing is really not my strong suit. So I just gave it a simple prompt to tell me a little story about the White House in this case, because I figured there'd be plenty of material on this. Now, the reason that I want to start with a script is because this style is heavily based on the voiceover and the narration, which also helps dictate the pacing and the type of assets that we need. So if we have the script in place already, it'll make it a lot easier in our asset search so we can make sure that we only have exactly what we need. The little script that ChatGPT gave me is: in the heart of Washington, D.C. lies a place steeped in history and intrigue. The White House, home to presidents past and present, holds many secrets within its walls. Hidden passageways rumored to connect key rooms. Just something super quick and easy that I thought could be pretty fun. As you can tell, I'm not very good at voiceovers, and I'm also not good at scripting. But that's why we're going to be using Artlist's new AI voiceover feature to help us get the exact tone and voice that we need for our animation. By the time you're watching this video, they've just launched the new AI voiceover feature, but I do want to preface this by saying that I'm using the beta version, just so you know that there can be some slight changes, but most importantly, you're going to have a lot more voices to pick from when you actually go and use this full feature. The great thing about this is if you already have an Artlist Max subscription like I do, then you already have the AI voiceover feature. You don't need to pay extra to get it. It's already included in your subscription, so you can use it just alongside anything else that you have. They also will be offering a voiceover only feature, so if you don't need anything else but the voiceover feature, they also have you covered in that. Before we get into actually playing around with it ourselves, I just want to emphasize that all of the voices that they have on there have been made by professional voiceover actors. That means not only are the voices unique, but they're also super high quality, and they have a very personal feel because they are based on real human speak. Now, if you put in our AirPods or headphones or whatever, let's head over to the Artlist website, and you can see already right here we've got this big old banner saying that they have added this new feature, and I'm just going to be navigating over to the voiceover feature. You can see the main page here lets you type in your text, and it's just selecting the first type of voice that's already here, but you can listen to them and kind of see what you want, and they've done a really good job of just adding a little bit of a description so you kind of have an idea of what the voice is going to sound like. But I love the little previews they have. Just you get such a good sense of what your final thing is going to sound like.
I remember the way we laughed, like everything was okay, even when it wasn't.
Like, listen to how real that sounds. It's insane. Now, I know that I kind of want this male voice just because that's kind of what the Lemmino channel uses. So I'm going to be sorting through, and I'm going to pick the male gender just because that's going to fit my style, and it's just going to remove a whole bunch of them. And you can even pick a little bit of a category that you want to do in. So you can pick like documentaries or trailers. So it just helps you narrow down the tone of voice. Well, let's listen to a couple so we can get a sense of what we have to pick from here.
In the heart of the Amazon, a lost tribe thrives in harmony. Before the hunt or fishing, they adorn their faces in sacred colors.
Like, you can't tell me that doesn't sound like a National Geographic type of voiceover. That's just insane.
The solar system, our cosmic home, it's a family of planets.
Okay.
They say life's a journey, but they never tell you what kind of road you're gonna find yourself.
That's the type of voice you need if you're making like a Western movie. It's crazy how many different voices they have. Like they legit have anything you need for any type of mood or genre you're trying to do.
Colors are manifestations of light, interacting with
I like
matter.
that one. That one, the Esteem and Professor so far, probably my favorite ones.
In my life, I've learned that success is not measured by...
Expert is good.
Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Our
That's it.
financial behavior course.
I think my favorite one is this Esteem one here, so I am just going to select it, and that'll put it up here, and you can see which one you've picked. And then we're just going to type in our little script here. I'm just going to type it in how I have it in my little script, and then we can work on the timing of it and stuff like that. We can always chop it up later on as well if we need to extend it a little bit, add some pauses, and change the pacing. Boom. And then we're just gonna hit generate. Then it'll do its thing, and you can see I've already played around with it just a little bit. And just like that, we have our voiceover. Let's listen back to it and see what we've got here.
In the heart of Washington, D.C., lies a place steeped in history and intrigue. The White House, home to presidents past and present, holds many secrets within its walls. Hidden passageways rumored to connect key rooms. And
okay, so I think maybe let's try and remove this comma right here and just do one period here and see how the pacing changes, or if there's even any changes to the pacing of it. Otherwise, we can always just download this and just trim it up a little bit to change it ourselves. But man, that just sounds like a sophisticated British person speaking to me. Okay, that's definitely better. Now, I also want to just point out real quick that you can go into voice settings and change around with some of the settings that they have in here in terms of getting the exact tone and voice that you need. But I think this works super well, so I'm just going to download that because I think that sounds absolutely fire. If you are interested in trying out this new feature, then head to the link in the description and use my link for Artlist to sign up for the annual subscription, where you get 2 free months when you sign up. And the voiceover feature is included in the Artlist Max subscription, so get that if you need a whole bunch of stuff. Otherwise, if you just want the voiceover feature, you can get that on a separate plan as well. And just like that, we can hop into After Effects because now we have our base. We know kind of all the assets that we need based off of this little voiceover, and also we kind of have a sense of the pacing. I'm just going to drag this in here and hit L twice to bring up our audio waveforms, and then I'm just going to trim it up just a little bit here. So let's just Shift Command D here, double L again, and maybe just trim that up just a little bit.
In the heart of Washington, D.C., lies a place steeped in history and intrigue. The White House, home to presidents past and present, holds many secrets within its walls.
Maybe just trim this up just a little bit. Just tighten that up just a tiny bit. And this one just a little bit also. Like that. Alright, let's listen to this.
In the heart of Washington, D.C., lies a place steeped in history and intrigue. The White House, home to presidents past and present, holds many secrets within its walls. Hidden passageways, rumored to connect key rooms.
Okay, that
in the
is
heart of Washington.
Chef's kiss. Now the first one we're going to do is a little bit of a map animation, and in this case I just have some pictures from Google Maps, believe it or not. It's I just screenshotted a couple of different levels of zoomed in and zoomed out, and the easiest way to do this is just to drag them all in. This will go perfectly for this first section where we talk about the in Washington DC blah blah blah.
In the heart of Washington, D.C., lies a place steeped in history and intrigue. The White House.
So basically this section, so I'm just gonna hit shift and a random number, in this case 6, just to create a marker, and we're just gonna name this map zoom, just to make it super easy for us. All I wanna do here is actually take these and put them into 3D space, and then I'm gonna right click down here, go to new camera, and create a 3D camera. You can also do this just by scaling them, but I actually really like using the 3D camera just because you can add some depth with clouds and play with the focus and all that good stuff. So I think in some cases it just looks a little bit better, and I enjoy doing it this way. We want the zoomed out one to be the first one to show, but actually I'm gonna start by taking the camera over here and just dragging it out to the right a whole bunch so we can get some really nice separation between all 3 layers. And you can even do it without the middle layer, but I just feel like it gives just a little bit more depth and makes it a little bit better looking in a way. But let's take this and just move it to, I think here's probably pretty good. Maybe lift it up just a little bit. That was too much. Like that. And then the medium one we'll just leave right in the middle. and then the zoomed in one, we'll just drag that way back here. And then we can add some clouds, and I've just got 2 different ones, create some different layers of depth and turn them into 3D space as well, and put them underneath the camera. And then maybe cloud 1 we'll just put down here somewhere, fairly close to our little area down here. And then the second one we'll put in between these 2 layers somewhere, like right there. And we can always mess around with them when we get that far. Now before we get too far, I'm just gonna take all of this and just move it into the assets, just to keep our project file nice and organized, and make sure to save plenty as you go. I want to start with the zoom through, and let's just go to about 2 seconds and open up, click the camera, hit P to keyframe the position, and then we can go forward a little bit. Let's go to 4 seconds, and then we're just going to take this and move it close until we have just the last one in frame. So zoom through, something like that maybe. And we can take the cloud that's back here and just scale that down a good bit because it's way too big, and maybe move that out to the side just a little bit, just as a nice little detail element over here. Maybe even scale up to something like 30. Then let's take this zoomed in one and just move it back just a little bit more. Then we can open our little grid by hitting Option and apostrophe, and I of course want to make sure I have that one selected because I don't need it over on this one. So we can hide that. Go back in here, line that up exactly where we want it, and maybe even move it just a little bit closer actually. We just want to make sure that our White House right here is centered up pretty good. So that looks pretty good. So now we can take the keyframes for our camera and we can add some sexy speed to it, or really any type of easing. And we want to make sure that we turn motion blur on for all of these layers. It's gonna not only help sell the transition between all 3 levels, but it also just matches the style that he uses. So now if we play this back,
in the heart of Washington DC lies a place steeped in history.
Get a nice little zoom through kind of thing. We can even maybe spread this out just a little bit more. And then one thing I'm gonna do is just add an expression to a couple of these to add a little bit more movement to the camera and the clouds and all that good stuff. And I might even wanna take maybe the second cloud here, which is that one, and maybe just move it up just a little bit and maybe out to the side, just to make sure we can kind of see what's going on here so it's not too confusing. But to the position of the camera here, I'm just gonna alt click and we're just gonna do a wiggle, and let's do 1,10, something super simple. And we can right click on that and copy the expression only, and then on the 2 clouds, select them and then hit Command V. And now if you hit P, you can see that that expression has been pasted onto that. So that'll give us just a little bit of camera movement. Let me just mute this real quick, just so we can play back without getting the audio. And let's have a look at that. And zoom through, and that looks super, super sweet. And it's just a nice little bit of motion here. Maybe even take this zoomed in one, and let's just move it up just a little bit more. That's pretty good. And then we can take this cloud that's down here and maybe just add a little bit of a position animation. So just keyframe the position and let's move it over just a little bit more. We could just move that over here because we don't need it to move too much up until that point. So it just adds a little bit of movement to it. And now we gotta adjust the focus distance of the camera so that this isn't blurry, of course. So we can just select the camera and search for focus distance and just keyframe it right here at the beginning. You can even hit Shift U to show the keyframe so that it's all lined up. And then we just want to look at our little line here, which is our focus distance line, and we just want to line it up with the layer position. So drag that out until we meet up with that. Boom, right there. And let's go to the end of our animation and just make sure that we once again have lined that up with this layer right here. So just drag that in a little bit and then just match the easing of this. So now this is in focus and this is in focus, which is exactly what we want. Another thing I want to add is just a little bit of like a text tag that you often see in the videos as well, just to give a little bit more context to the location. And this is going to be super simple. We are going to create a little shape up here by hitting our rectangle tool, and for the fill we're going to put that to let's just do black for now. And then the stroke will make white. And again, this comes down to the monochromatic kind of color scheme that they always use in the videos. And let's just draw out a little rectangle here and place that right in the center. And we're gonna add some text by picking our text tool, and we're just gonna type out Washington DC. Let's center align our text and make sure that is centered up. And again, change the color to a white, keep that monochromatic theme going. And we're gonna pick a monospace font. I have a good few installed, and we just want something that looks pretty clean, that kind of fits the style. And I think something like this, the Azure Mono Light, actually looks pretty good. And we're just gonna scale that down just a little bit, center that up once again, and then we can change the size of our rectangle to fit our text. So we're just gonna unlink the size in here and decrease the width a little bit and increase the boom. So that looks pretty good. And one thing he also has in some of them is a little arrow pointing to exactly where it is, and that's super simple to create. We are just gonna add a triangle, which is gonna be our arrow type of thing, and we're just gonna use the polygon tool. You can just draw out any sort of polygon, just holding down shift, and then change it to just be a 3-point polygon, just like that. And you can rotate it minus 90 degrees and change the fill to be white. And we can even remove the stroke for this one and just center that up. Let's just drag this down, be the right height, and move that up. And then we're just gonna shrink it down a good bit, so it's just a tiny little bit of itsy bitsy little arrow, kind of giving us a little bit of a direction clue. Then I'm just gonna hit U to hide all of that, and we can take all of these little things, so it's your background, shape, and arrow, shape, and we can change the color of all of this so we know exactly what is what. Let's change that to an orange, and then I'm just going to use void to link them all to essentially a null. You can use a null if that's what you want to do. Void is super easy to use, but then we can just scale it down a little bit and move it over exactly to where we want it to be. I'm not too sure the exact location of Washington on the map. I think it's somewhere over this way. That looks pretty good, pretty accurate. And then we can just take a little circle or an ellipse, change the fill to a red color, and just draw out a little circle here. That is pretty much it for like the design elements itself. Now we need to stylize it a little bit to actually, you know, fit the right style and add just a little bit of animation to our location markers and all that stuff. We can start by taking all of this, and we can even put this into 3D space if we wanted to. And then we of course just want to move all of this up to be in the right location like that. Boom. And maybe even over a little bit. So now that's in 3D space as well, so it'll move with our camera movement as well, which is super neat and handy, and we don't have to worry about animating it out. But we do want to add just a little bit of in animation. So for the circle itself, we're just going to do a very simple scale animation. So just at 1 second, keyframe it at 100, go back 12 frames and set it to 0. Super simple scale animation, and we're just going to add a super sexy in animation, which is just a very simple curve, just starts very fast and then slows down. Nothing too spectacular here. And then for the background shape, we are going to open up the size. So go into contents, rectangle path, and keyframe the size. And then we're going to go back a little bit, and we are going to set it to 0 in the first parameter here. So it just kind of animates out, which is also very typical in the Lemmino style, and animate that. And we can just link up these keyframes so that they match. I think that would look pretty good. And the arrow shape, we will type in scale, and we are going to unlink that, and then we are going to go back to the beginning here again and keyframe the scale, and then go forward, decrease the first one to 0 so it kind of animates up that way instead, and add the super sexy in once again. But this time we only want it to come in after it's kind of reached the end. I have the keyframes the wrong way around, great. But we don't want the arrow to animate out until it kind of reaches the end here, so we're just going to move that over just a little bit so that once our box kind of reaches the end, our arrow starts to animate out. And we can trim the layers right here so that it only starts after we need it. And then for the text animation, we're just going to have the box reveal the text. So we're just going to take the text and track mat it to the rectangle background and re-show that. So now once the text, or once the box expands, we see the text in there. And we can move the circle shape up here as well so that it doesn't come in super early. And then we can add a deep glow to this because that is super typical and just helps emphasize it just a little bit. For the background, we are gonna add a shape adjustment layer, and then we're gonna add the Lumetri effect, which is gonna let us just make it black and white, and go into creative and then just decrease the saturation. And then you can go into something like the basic corrections and play around with the contrast, the highlights. And this is just about playing around until you find the right sort of look. You don't want it to be too dark and contrasty, so I like increasing the highlights a good bit and then just decreasing the shadows just a little bit to maintain that contrast. So playing that back, we now have something that looks kind of like this. Just a super simple little animation, and you can see how by having the text in 3D space, how it moves when we zoom in as well. So it's just super nice. And one thing we could do if we wanted to was to actually just play around with the position of this one a little bit so that we actually zoom into where our marker is. And the way that I would go about doing that is taking the void and then linking the void to our zoomed out version. And then in the zoomed out version, keyframe the position a little bit. We're gonna open up the position and the scale. And we're gonna start by just playing around with the scale a little bit. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So set that to something like 110, maybe even 115. And we do wanna make sure that our little circle dot here is linked to the void as well. Otherwise, we're gonna end up with something that looks not the way we want to. Then what we can do here is just animate the position a little bit as well so that we get a little bit closer to the center. We can always open our grid, and then you can take these keyframes and just add some sexy speed to them. Add motion blur to all this. Also, make sure everything has motion blur. So we get a little bit of a punch in when our text comes in, and then we just get a little bit more of a natural looking zoom because we have that position animation that goes in, and then it just looks like we're actually going down into the location instead of just zooming in the middle and then getting to our location, if that makes sense. Now let's have a listen to this with our little voiceover as well.
Washington, D.C. lies a place steeped in history and intrigue.
That is cold. And with that being said, we can now go on into the second bit of this, which is going to be a little bit of like an article showcase that is just super clean. And we'll just cut all of these layers because I didn't see too many of those like kind of like a magnets media type of transitions where it transitions from scene to scene in some flashy way. It's a lot of match cuts, which keeps it super simple stylistically, but also it fits the right vibe. It's not supposed to be super flashy, it's supposed to be informative. Now we can close the 2-view mode here, and we are simply gonna create a black background here. So hitting Command Y to create a solid and just name it background. And we're gonna start it right here where everything else goes in. And I'm gonna open up my Finder window, and I have an article here. I'm just gonna drag that in, and then I'm gonna place it in the assets folder. Hit S to bring up the scale for this. We need a couple of different elements. The way they usually do this is they have a little cutout of the name of the newspaper. So we're gonna cut this out just using our mask tool here. Nothing fancy like that. And we can just rename this article title and trim that up right here. And we want to make sure that this is in the center of our composition and put it up and maybe even scale it up a little bit. Then we'll duplicate this and hit M to remove the path here, and we'll place it behind. And we're going to scale this up a good bit. So hit S and just scale this to fit. And then we're going to put that right there. I'd say that looks pretty good. And we can hide this for now. And we'll actually crop this out because we don't need this up here. Hit M, and then we're just gonna subtract it so we only get this bit. Now we can remove our grid, and I'm gonna add an invert to it so that we get all the text in white. We don't want it on the images themselves, so we'll duplicate that again and just delete the invert and just mask out the pictures with another masking tool. So now we have these images perfectly in here. They look completely fine. Now we can select our bottom layer and add a color key. You can even do something like a luma key, which basically just takes black and white values and just increase the threshold until you don't have that background anymore. So now we have no background on that, but we have the white text and all that good stuff. And let's show our title up here. we are of course going to add an invert to that as well. And we can just copy the Luma key that we have for the first one, paste it on there. Now you still have a little bit of that text up there, which looks kind of confusing. So all we're gonna do there is add a little shape tool here, and we're gonna change the fill to a black and white gradient, just any sort of gradient really. And we're gonna remove these two, we don't need that. We just want it to be a linear gradient going from black to black. But this first one, we are gonna set to 0% opacity, and we're just gonna draw out a shape up here, and then we are gonna change the gradient to be a top-down gradient so that it just fades out what's up at the top just a little bit and place it behind our title here. So that just brings the attention back down to the article itself. As far as the animation goes for this, we're gonna keep it super simple. The only things that we wanna do here is just add a slight position animation for everything that's gonna come in. And then we want to emphasize or kind of take the viewer's attention and bring it to just this section right here. And the way we're gonna do that is by creating a shape layer here. And let's just create the full screen and turn it into a solid and change that to a black, and we can decrease the opacity a good bit like that. And then we're just going to add a shape, so we want to make sure that we pick this tool up here once we have our rectangle selected, and on our shape layer we set it to a mask instead of a shape, and then we can just draw out our shape here, and then we want to invert it or change it to subtract. And now we get this little focus on the sides so that everything else becomes kind of blurry. And then we're just going to animate the opacity of this. So right now it's at 47. Let's go forward a little bit and keyframe that because we want it to gradually focus in on it, and then just set that down to 0 at the very beginning, so that if you play that back, you can see you just get that very gradual focus in on it. And you can even increase the opacity of it a little bit just to really drag it in there. But that is the main technique behind it. And then as far as the position goes, we are just gonna add some very simple position animations to this. We can take all of these actually, just make it super simple on ourselves, link them all to a void or null if you don't have void, although it is a free plugin. Hit P, and we're just gonna go forward. Let's go right here, and then keyframe the Y position, go back and just drag that down just a little bit. And we're just gonna add the super sexy in animation. Might even accentuate it just a little bit more. And I don't want this one to go with it, so I'm just gonna unlink that and make sure that that is at the top still. Looks like I accidentally created these two, so I'm just gonna duplicate it, and then I'm just gonna delete that from it and the opposite one from this one, so that we get those on separate layers. And it's this one I don't want to move, which is our little top gradient. Hit M to bring up the mask, delete the mask, and we just want to make sure that our gradient is still exactly where you want it, so it fades out that top bit. So now we have this nice little emphasis, and we can even add a scale animation to the article as well using our void layer, and then go forward and scale it up just a little bit so we can zoom in. And you can even keyframe the position parameters and go forward a little bit and just move that up just a little bit. And now we just get a little bit of a punch in. And again, just emphasizes the views for the viewer. So let's have a look at this with the narration.
Heart of Washington, D.C. lies a place steeped in history and intrigue. The White House, home to presidents past and present, holds many secrets within its walls. Hidden passageways.
That is pretty much it for the little article animation. Now the next scene I want to do is just a little document overview. So let's take this one, this one, and this one, and we'll just drag those in, and we're going to trim them right here and scale them down a whole bunch to actually fit the screen itself, but still make sure that they are all the same size. So scale them up, or the same height I should say, like that. Then we are going to position these just a little bit randomly, space that out a little bit, and just add a little bit of rotation to these, and maybe scale them down just ever so slightly like that, just so they're not cropped off at the top of our screen. And we can move these in just a little bit closer to one another, rotate it just a little bit less. And then as these come in, which we're gonna do with a very simple position animation, I'm gonna hit P, go forward a little bit, and keyframe the position of them, and just drag them out to the side here. And we're just gonna add the super sexy speed in right there, and we can stagger them just a little bit Boom, so we get the first one coming in, and then the two other kind of follow suit a little bit. Might even exaggerate it just a little bit more. And when they come in, I want to essentially kind of fade this out a little bit so that it's very subtle. And the easiest way to do this is actually just creating a black solid and just increasing the opacity of it. So we're gonna set that to 0 to begin with, right here, and then keyframe that at 0. And as these come in, just set that up to something that's pretty high. Just ever so slightly want to see the background here. And it's really that simple. Might even add some easing to this. Let's just do the same easing as all of this. Now, of course, we do want to make sure this fits the style, so we're just gonna add a Lumetri color to this, go into the creative and decrease the saturation, and maybe increase the contrast and the highlights just a little bit, increase the exposure a little bit so it looks a little bit more white, and decrease the shadows, get some nice contrast in there. And then we can copy that to the two others. And maybe even on this one, decrease the exposure just a little bit so it's not overexposed, and this middle one as well. It's kind of hard to tell one from another, so we're gonna use the magic trick of drop shadow by adding that on there. And just let's increase the distance a little bit, something like that, and then just decrease the opacity a good bit, and then copy that onto the other one as well over here. And then that just gives us just a little bit of separation there. But that is, I mean, that's pretty much it for that little animation itself. Just a nice little show a couple of documents. And then in this case, I want to transition into a little image of like a blueprint type thing. So I'm gonna take that, drag that in, and we're actually gonna keep this super simple. So let's say I want it to be this big. I'm gonna trim this up right over here somewhere. I think that looks pretty good. And we are just gonna do a simple cut. So I'm gonna add another black background by hitting Command Y and putting that right underneath. What I wanna do here is just give it that typical Lemmino border. You can just create a little rectangle shape tool, and you just wanna make sure that it's the same size as your image here. Just click and drag. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to be pretty close to anyways. You can put it behind your text, and you can remove the fill from it. You don't need it. You can have it if you want to. Let's just do a fill for now, and we'll set it to white. And then we're gonna add a stroke and set that to white as well. And then we're just gonna increase the stroke here to give it that border. And then we're gonna add a turbulent displace to this layer to get that textured look. And this is a little bit too crazy. We're gonna set it to something like 10 by 10. We're just gonna give it a little bit of texture, and you can always play around with it to get the exact look that you want. But I think this looks pretty good in terms of getting the right style. Otherwise, play with the amount a little bit and the size, maybe decrease it a little bit. And then we're gonna open up the evolution options, alt click the random seed, and then we're just gonna type in posterize time, set that to something like 3, pretty low. 3, 6 usually works pretty well. And then do a random 10,000, something like that. And that's just gonna give you just that little bit of wiggle in the texture itself, just to add a little bit of that texture. What you can do if you want that grainy look to it as well, you can duplicate it and then add a false box blur and increase that a little bit so you get some of that nice feathering. You can even increase the border just a little bit too. And then you can add a roughen edges effect. And then you just wanna decrease the scale to be pretty low, and that just gives you that nice kind of noise texture. Play around with the settings of it a little bit to get the right feathering and all that stuff that you kind of want. And then you're just gonna add a deep glow to that as well. Decrease the exposure from like 0.2 or maybe even less than that, and then set the radius to pretty high. You can even remove the fill, and that'll change kind of the look of it too. Or what you could do is delete that. What you can do as well is take the border stroke and then also the roughen edges and pre-comp them in just like this border pre, and then add a deep glow to that. Boom, and then set it to something like 0.2, just a slight little bit of glow, maybe even a little bit less than that, something like 0.1, just very subtle. Increase the spread a little bit, and that is pretty much it to get that textured look in there, and you get just a little bit of that movement. Now the last bit to really complete the look is to add an adjustment layer, and this is a paid plugin, but you want to add Warp Chroma. There you go. And that's how you get that distortion of the edges that you see in those videos. It's a super neat plugin because it works super fast, it renders super quick, but that's pretty much how you get that look. And you can see, especially on the map bit, let's trim that up. You don't need all of that. It just looks super, super cool, especially when you zoom in, get up close, you see that nice chromatic aberration in there.
In the heart of Washington, D.C., lies a place steeped in history and intrigue. The White House, home to presidents past and present, holds many secrets within its walls, hidden passageways, rumored to connect key rooms.
But that is pretty much it for this tutorial. That's a little bit of an insight into how you can animate something like Lemmino. Overall, super simple style, monochromatic, and high quality assets is the way to go. Now, this wouldn't be possible without the AI voiceover feature, which makes it so that you don't have to listen to my voice for cool voiceovers, and instead you can listen to something that's cinematic and super clean and high quality. Again, shout out to Artlist for sponsoring this video. If you are interested in trying out this new feature, then head to the link in the description and use my link for Artlist to sign up for the annual subscription, where you get 2 free months when you sign up. And the voiceover feature is included in the Artlist Max subscription, so get that if you need a whole bunch of stuff. Otherwise, if you just want the voiceover feature, you can get that on a separate plan as well. But with that being said, I just want to say thank you for watching along. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you feel inspired to go out and create something yourself and try out this new feature. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I guess I'll see you again pretty soon. Peace out.